bringing the people behind our food to life.
The thing that interested me a lot was what motivates you to do what you do, and you've been doing it for a while. Why? What's the passion? What drives you?
My main motivation is the inherent integrity of the natural world. There's a creation, actually, that we've been given as the common heritage of every creature and living thing on the planet, and that is being broken. It's being exploited, commodified, patented, and used right now, and that, to me, is an essential violation that I'm trying to let people know about and urge them to make sure we stop what's going on. The technologies that are being used today are lethal, toxic, and I think it's a moral problem as much as all the other environmental and social aspects.
Tell me about how you got grounded in food.
I've always been involved in agriculture. You know, a long time ago I was a USDA. I had been married to a farmer and farmed here in California. But I was kind of more an environmentalist. You know, I was really caring about the water and working on those issues as a lawyer. After I left government, I was an environmental lawyer, and I worked a lot with indigenous people. And one of the things I noticed was that food was the one thing that tied us to the places where we live, the people that we care about, our cultures, each other, the land. And it seemed to be the common denominator. And I started to notice that the environmental movement had kind of neglected agriculture, rightly seeing that industrial agriculture was a major polluter, but not really knowing what to do, because actually sustainable agriculture is the solution to so many of our environmental problems. Well, right in the middle of that development in my thinking, I moved to Vietnam. And when you live in a third world country, in Vietnam, for instance, people think they're poor. But if you go into the markets, they're just burgeoning with an enormous diversity of food because they still have a diverse local food system. You know, they're still living off the land. They have a monoculture agriculture because they sell a lot, they want, you know, to sell a lot of rice and participate in the global agricultural system. But the people themselves are still feeding themselves. And I learned from them a lot about what food really means and how the industrial system works and how diverse local food systems where people are engaged in the food system and feed themselves. Their farms often will have a pig, they'll have a little fish pond, they'll grow a little rice, they'll grow some other foods and vegetables. Very diverse, very intense system. They feed their households, they feed their neighbors, and they succeed at this very well. And of course, we've given that up pretty much. So we lost out. They taught me what's possible.
Well, it just seems to me that there's this disconnect that the industry wants us sometimes to think of food in terms of its components, its nutrients. But what you're talking about is food as an expression of a culture, of a people that feeds the community in a different way than just nutrition.
Right, right. Well, you know, the short story of 20th century agriculture is that we took the culture out of agriculture. And what we were left with is agribusiness. It was a big mistake. We thought we could produce more food cheaply, and we bought into this idea of convenience and the illusion of cheap food. It's not cheap. We pay for it in our healthcare system, which is the most expensive in the world. We pay for it in our environmental problems. But you know, that's what people think they're doing, is having cheap food. It's nutritionally quite vacant as well. But really, the solution to our agricultural problems is to reintegrate what food is. It's nutrition, it's culture, it's a way of bringing people together within their communities. For instance, not everybody can grow all the food they need, so you have to rely on each other. And we need to absolutely do this, by the way. Food is so important to our communities now, and we're getting back to the farmers market, community-supported agriculture, exchanging food, ways of living that involve reconnecting to the food system. It's so important because we are facing environmental issues that are very serious. We are facing what they call the perfect storm of environmental problems, including global warming which has extreme weather events like hurricanes, species extinction, the incredible loss of soil and clean water, and the basic infrastructure. The United Nations studies are showing that the basic biological systems of the planet are seriously degraded. 60% of them are so degraded they're no longer providing our life support systems. We're really facing, this is going to be a crisis for us. And we can survive. In fact, we can thrive. But right now we have an economic meltdown, okay? And what it was caused by was greed. And when human beings are faced with those kinds of fears, they often will resort to hoarding and scarcity. Again, I get back to this idea of the scarcity mentality. And what I've learned in the last year, working with seeds and farmers and people engaged in growing and providing food in their communities, is that really the value we need most right now is generosity. The lesson of the seed is generosity, adaptability, resiliency. Food isn't just nutrition. The culture of food has values in it that teach us how to live. That's what native people and traditional peoples have known all along, and that's why they survive through all the ups and downs of the last 15, 20,000 years with our species. They understand this thing that you're talking about, which is that when times get tough, we have to rely on each other, we have to trust each other. And that requires that we have a value system that emphasizes sharing and emphasizes other values other than what I have to say, the capitalistic system, which is based on the scarcity of mentality of scarcity, okay? So we need something else. You know, what that is, we need to figure that out. I don't go into communities to tell them what they need to do. Each community has to figure out for themselves what's right for them, because every place is different. A desert community and their water needs and their growing issues are going to be different than an urban community or a tropical forest. So each community needs to, but there are great models that are being developed in the communities for how to feed themselves, provide for energy, health, all of these things. We've got this idea that we have to have some scientists from somewhere else to come in, or a government to come in and tell us what to do. Permaculture, which is a great design it's a great part of agricultural change that's going on. It's a design and a way of asking questions about how we live on the land. They always like to say, everything you need is already here. You know, taking what you already have in your communities, how do you map the resources and assets? How do you get to the next step and ask the questions that need to be asked? I said last night, and I just want to emphasize this, that the key is knowing what you don't know. And one of the reasons I like to really point out the terrible deficits of these toxic technologies, like genetically modified organisms, is it presumes we know what nature needs, what we need, what the food system needs. It's like one engineer has an idea about what they're going to do, and we're imposing a very limited mindset on the natural world or on the food system. And it doesn't really work, actually. But the problem is that there's this thinking that, well, we know what's right. We know how to solve these problems. We don't know how to solve these problems. And the great geniuses, the Luther Burbanks that developed great, foods, and Darwin, he figured out really important biological principles, right? He knew what he didn't know. He asked questions. And that's where we need to go back to. But we need to not ask people to come in and tell us what to do or how to think. We need to figure it out for ourselves.